Well, hello, Endow ladies. I know I say this on every episode, but I really am so excited to be here today with my dear friend, Ben Heschmeyer, because we've been talking for a long time about Bach, even before I really felt like I got to know Edith Stein and her connection with the music of Bach. So welcome, Ben. Welcome. Welcome to
Thanks
the
for having me, Simone.
So this is I'm just so excited about this because I love any opportunity to talk about music and my love for concert music and classical music. So Ben, thanks for being here.
I'm happy to be here. I'm excited for the conversation.
And okay, the initial plan for this podcast was to release it on the feast of St. Edith Stein, but I can't wait that long. I cannot wait till August. So what was it? April 12th, Ben, is the
Okay,
date.
cool.
April 12th that she took her vows as a Carmelite. So that's this week. This is being released the week of her profession as a Carmelite nun. So for those who are not familiar with Edith Stein or who have not done the Endow study on Edith Stein, one of the most fascinating aspects of her life is that she left her Jewish faith at the age of 13, 14, became an atheist, and then later on had a conversion to the Catholic faith, much to the disappointment and feelings of betrayal of her Jewish family. Yeah, through the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila, and then not only converted to Catholicism, but found a vocation in the Carmelite order of Saint Teresa of Avila as well. And then later in 1942 was sent to Auschwitz concentration camp and died in a gas chamber. So all that as a little bit of a quick biography to say that her own intellectual journey as a Jewish girl, as a philosopher, particularly phenomenology, and then later as a Catholic and a Carmelite nun, those are kind of the things about Edith Stein that we know about. But the thing that we may not know about is that during her bouts with depression, it was the music of Bach that healed her of that. And this isn't to say that this is all that you need if you are struggling with anxiety and depression, but that this is actually a true avenue of healing. So Ben, a little bit about your background in music. Tell me about your relationship with music, because it is such a big part of your life as a musician.
Yeah. Well, now I'm a lowly undergrad in music composition. I compose classical music. I was not really raised to a particularly musical family. I was raised to a Catholic family, and I think kind of my earliest moment of really loving a piece of music was Pange Lingua, the chant version, not the version that people have like harmonized since, but really just in Gregorian chant. I think I was in 8th grade, and I remember going home and researching the lyrics and finding out what that meant. And I also, Pange Lingua was written by Aquinas, and he was my confirmation saint. So aside from that, though, I really didn't have much experience with anything particularly classical or that we would call concert music. It was, I grew up playing guitar and I loved Jimi Hendrix, and I played blues and rock and reggae, and then I spent 6 years producing electronic dance music. And I had kind of just like a big bang experience when I was 19. It was somewhere in the middle of December of 2014. I was in I really related to this when we were talking about Edith Stein and having some depression and Bach taking her out of that. For me, it was Beethoven. And actually, I wouldn't say that he cleared away the depression, but my first real musical, like, oh my goodness, I didn't know what I was missing moment was in the middle of December of 2014. I was in a particularly self-pitying mood. And so I researched like Beethoven minor piano sonata. Like I wanted to just, I thought it would just be like emo music or something. Mm-hmm. And I listened to it, and it was his 8th sonata, affectionately called the Pathétique. And Arthur Schnabel was the pianist. And maybe 30 seconds in, I knew that I was in the presence of something I had never experienced before. It's hard to describe exactly what it was that I loved so much about it, but I was I was particularly focused on the music, and I remember having headphones on and not multitasking or anything, but totally giving myself to the music. And it was just the art with which he would craft his melodies, but then the way each section would build organically out of the one that just occurred was, I just had no idea that music could be that incredible. So really ever since then, I immediately stopped creating electronic dance music because it all seemed just so shallow to me after that moment.
Wow.
And started slowly but surely learning piano and trying to learn how to compose and compose in the classical style. And yeah, since then, I mean, I guess that was 6 years ago or 5 or 6 years ago. And ever since then, yeah, it's been just progressively becoming more and more, falling deeper and deeper in love with the musical tradition that has been handed down to us.
So you said something really, that's beautiful. And you said something really interesting to me about, this was, I think, when we first became friends. I love Beethoven and Mozart, but always a bit intimidated by Bach. And you got excited about that. And you said, because would you say that Bach is your touchstone in many ways?
Yeah, he's the way I put it is like he's my desert island composer. You know, if I was to take anybody's full body of work to a desert island, like there would not even be a close second.
Wow, not even
but of course, it feels a little bit like picking a favorite child, you know, to say who's my favorite composer, but he's my desert island composer.
Your desert island. Well, so I have enough musical friends and professional musician friends to know that Bach is like the guy, you know, so I trust the authority of my musical friends. But the thing that that you were excited about, the way that you phrased it to me, was if you haven't, apart from like, I mean, there have been pieces of Bach that I have really appreciated and enjoyed, but that's very different than understanding how to listen to him, how to understand him, how to enter in a different way. And you said that's great news, because that means that there are experiences and encounters that you have yet to happen for you. And so that was very exciting to me. It's not the same as when you take someone to Disneyland for the first time, but you know, when you do find that person that has never been to Disneyland and you're excited to take them, I think that was what you were saying to me about Bach. So especially last summer, that was the time that I was kind of begging you for, you know, what do I listen to? What do I, you know, how do I approach this? And still on that journey. So let me read from our Endow study right now, a little bit about Edith's experience with Bach. So this is from our study guide, if you don't mind. Let me move this way. Okay, so here's what it says. I loved the classical operas as much as I did the great tragedies. The first I heard was the Magic Flute. We bought the piano score and soon knew it by heart. So too with Fidelio, which always remained my favorite. I also heard Wagner, and during a performance found it impossible wholly to evade its magic. Still, I repudiated this music, with the sole exception of Die Meistersinger. I had a predilection for Bach. This world of purity and strict regularity attracted me most intimately. Later, when I came to know Gregorian chant, I felt completely at home for the first time. And then I understood what had moved me so much in Bach. Okay, what is she saying? Do you know? This is the first time I'm reading this to you, so I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but I'm very curious.
Yeah, I was actually, we didn't talk about this before, but I read that passage, I think 2 nights ago, and was kind of reflecting on it. And so she shows definitely a preference for what we would call absolute music, which there became kind of this division in the late 19th century, and Wagner was kind of the one who spearheaded this. Him and what was called the New German School. So him and Franz Liszt and Hector Berlioz were like these romantic artists who were very focused on like putting literature to music in form of like tone poem, or they kind of had this idea that they could create this new art form that combined all art forms. On the other side of the fence, and the fence that I find myself on, and that evidently Edith Stein found herself on, is the side of Brahms and Schumann, who still viewed music as very much like the best music is absolute music. And Bach was completely idolized by both Schumann and Brahms, but also every other composer. And to Wagner's credit, he said that Bach is the most stupendous miracle in all of music. So, I'm totally the same way as Edith Stein. Like there are times where I'm really, really drawn into Wagner, but there's just something much more pure. And listening to Bach, it's almost like you're getting like a God's eye view of the world. And it's not to say that's not human, because he expresses human emotion incredibly well, even in a religious context like the St. Matthew Passion. But there is just something different, and Gregorian chant shares that. Where there's a gravity and a seriousness to the music, and we'll talk about this a little later, but when you contrast that sort of religious music with like Christian rock and stuff today, it's like you would know this was religious music even if you had no idea what they were saying. That's the feeling you get with Bach, particularly in his minor pieces.
Got it.
So I think that's what she tapped into, and I feel absolutely the same way as her.
Amazing. And okay, so here's something else she says about her experience of classical music curing her of depression. She says, "It was probably the summer of 1912 when I read the controversial novel Helmut-Haringna. Portraying student life, it portrayed in frighteningly vivid color the deplorable conditions in the fraternities with their senseless drinking requirements and the consequent moral aberrations. I was filled with such aversion that it took weeks before I recovered from it. I had lost all confidence in the persons with whom I associated daily. I went about as one unbearably burdened, and I was beyond finding enjoyment in anything at all. What cured me of this depression is highly significant. That year, a great Bach festival was given in Breslau. Bach was my favorite, so naturally I had a ticket for each of the performances, an organ concert, chamber music, and a gala evening of orchestral and vocal music. I no longer recall which oratorio was being presented that evening. I only know that Luther's defiant hymn, A Mighty Fortress, was included. I had always liked singing it in our school devotions. When in stirring battle cry, the verse was sung, and though this world with devils filled should threaten to undo us, we will not fear, truth will triumph through us. My pessimistic outlook vanished completely. True, the world might be evil, but if the small group of friends in whom I had confidence and I strove with all our might, we should certainly have done with all the devils." Thoughts?
Yeah, that's incredible. It's you need something to go towards, I think, when everything around you seems messed up and degraded and kind of debasing. Having something that is exactly the opposite of all of that, something truly perfect, which is, I would really consider Bach's music perfect. And having that, and it just opens up this world of beauty and true beauty that is like so much more appealing and fulfilling than the much more kind of saccharine and sweet and not everyday beauties, because those are great too, but the kind of the base, more pleasures, So seeing Bach or something that is really perfect and beautiful in that way, I think can show us that actually we don't need this stuff that's around us that is maybe more tempting, but is ultimately not satisfying.
Yeah, it appeals, kind of popular music appeals more to, well, I guess we don't have time for the conversation too much about how pop music can appeal to lower appetites and how actually that can be morally dangerous depending on which songs we're talking about here. But that even in, no one can say that listening to Beethoven or Dvorak is immoral, but you're saying that there's something distinct in listening to Bach, and that's something more perfect, more spiritual, more transcendental. And that I think it likens to kind of the contemplative intellectual vision. So where maybe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert here, maybe Bach, or I'm sorry, Beethoven can kind of soothe our emotions or our current experiences. It's actually Bach that's like bringing us into an intellectual, if you will, experience of music.
Well, so actually, I don't think I'd go that far. I think Beethoven, so I don't say that Bach is the only perfect composer, but what he was going after, I mean, like Bach said that the whole purpose of music, I think, is respite for the soul and the glorification of God. I might be getting that paraphrase slightly wrong, but that's the essence of it.
Mm-hmm.
Beethoven didn't think that, but, you know, his Missa Solemnis or any of his sacred music is just as incredible. Any of these great masters, I would say that their music, depending on the piece, is perfect. You know, there are some pieces I wouldn't say that of with Beethoven, for example, but he also is, I think, just trying to do something kind of fundamentally different. You know, he's like the first kind of modern composer where he's composing from within and what he feels. I don't care if other people like it. This is what I feel, and I'm the expert here.
I'm the
And
expert on my experience, and here it is. Here's my experience. Now,
right.
would you say that it's new and modern because it was self-expression in a way?
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. That's why he kind of started the Romantic era.
Okay, no wonder I like him so much.
Yeah, me too.
You know, okay. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's sometimes around musical sorts of people, you know, it's almost like I feel a little bit judged for how much I like the Romantics, you know, so.
It's my absolute favorite. Uh, it's my favorite time period, I would say, except for the Baroque, and the Baroque literally only because of Bach. You know, I enjoy Handel and some Telemann and stuff, but it's really, there's like Bach, and then aside from that, like I'm absolutely in love with the Romantics, and also again the Romantic composers that I love the most share this affection for Bach. Um, Basically, every composer of, you know, up until very, very recently was just completely bowled over by the work of Bach. Not only the quality, but the sheer amount of it is insane as well.
Why is Bach sometimes, and I guess maybe this is a good transition into how to listen, why is Bach harder to listen to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It was difficult for me. So I told you my initial breakthrough in classical music was Beethoven. And then like the rest of Beethoven, as far as my ears were concerned, was like off limits. Like I wasn't getting that same thing. My next kind of entry point, aside from the Pathetique Sonata, was Chopin. And I spent a year just obsessing over Chopin. And then, you know, also enjoying some of the other composers, but I really had to work my way up to Bach. But I would tell you maybe the most important thing that I had that allowed me to finally appreciate Bach is what I call the assumption of ignorance. That if I had to say what changed in me the night that I heard Beethoven the first time, it was that I gained the assumption of ignorance, which I think it's the most important tool we can have in our aesthetic outlook, which is just to say that if for hundreds of years people have been talking about the same composer or the same piece, and very, very well-educated and talented musicians all respect it, it's okay if you don't get it right away. But the problem is probably not with the composer. You know, like you probably aren't listening right.
Okay.
And that's not to, that shouldn't be a depressing fact, and that shouldn't be anything that humiliates us. It's like, I don't think I can think of something that's more exciting as a person to just to assume that's true. And it's like, wow, okay, just how many more universes of amazing artistic experiences there are for me, you know?
Incredible.
So yeah, so Bach, it took me a while, and I think it was maybe his Little Fugue in G minor was my first like real breakthrough. Um, but his music is particularly difficult because we are used to hearing um, what's called monophonic music. So it's like there's one main melody over chord progressions, and then obviously like there's rhythm and stuff, and the melody is usually sung by somebody, but sometimes a guitar or whatever. So that's the music that we're used to hearing. And then go back a little further, even to the classical era, and like Mozart's music, generally speaking, is monophonic as well. But there's lots of subtle things happening in the middle register and in the bass. So all that's still amazingly well composed, but there is one focal point. That's how our ears have been trained
Mm-hmm.
for the last hundreds of years. But Bach wrote polyphonic music, which is music with multiple melodies. So not he's not thinking in terms of chords, where there's a melody and then there's a chord that sits underneath it. He's thinking in terms of multiple melodies that, through the art of what they call counterpoint, are combining to make blocks of harmony that we can identify as chords, but that's not how he's thinking. And none of those melodies are more important than any other. They're all of the same value.
Mm-hmm.
And so in some ways, it's like trying to learn how to listen to like 4 or 5 different conversations at once and retain the content of each of those conversations.
Oh, wow. Which only women
That's why it can be difficult.
can do, I think. I don't think men can do.
Sorry, what did you say?
I was making a joke about, I think women can do that. I think we can,
Yes.
we can be in a room, just know what everybody's talking about and keep up with everybody while pretending to focus on the person right in front of us. Just kidding. Although I have but okay, so is this a good time? Because I have like 3-4 other things that I have been inspired to ask you about, but is this a good time for you to give us a little brief primer on how to listen to Bach?
Yes, yeah. And everything I say of Bach can also be said, I think, of other great classical music. So one of the first things is to just realize the historical context and how different it was from history today. So now music is almost entirely overheard rather than actively listened to. Like you cannot go into any public space. There's one coffee shop in Kansas City that does not play music, and it's only on the 2nd floor. It's my favorite coffee shop for this reason, but every other place.
What coffee shop is that? I've got to know.
It's called Mud Pie. Next time you come here, we'll go to the 2nd floor of Mud Pie. So they don't play music, but everywhere else, music is just the background to consumerism, basically.
Yes, we're oppressed with too much noise.
Yes, so that's definitely true. But then even music that we voluntarily listen to and enjoy, we're often doing that while we're multitasking. So even if it's just driving or on the treadmill or while working or studying or something. So previous centuries would have seen all of that as insane because obviously they had no device for portable media.
Right.
So
you heard Mozart live because that was the only way.
Yeah, that, or you had to get a copy of the score and play it yourself at the piano. But either way, those are both incredibly. You need a lot of concentration to listen to the music. The music had to be so interesting that it could withstand full human attention.
Yes.
Whereas today, not really. Like you don't. The idea of sitting down and like really reflecting on the latest pop song is
and we've lost that capacity for that kind of attention, and no need to go into what everybody knows about what social media has done to our brains. But I think Chesterton mentioned that how offensive it was to listen to music during dinner, that dinner ought to be dinner and listening ought to be for listening. Exactly. So this idea of like that listening to music was an event and that you could enter into. So
yeah, exactly. So that's one thing to keep in mind is when you're going to listen to a piece of classical music, give yourself some time to do that and only that. And I would also say do it with either headphones or like a pair of speakers that has bass on it. Do not listen over like a phone speaker or even your laptop speakers, because so much classical music is based on the bass,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just way too intricate.
Mm.
Uh, so it's like if you were to look at, I don't know, like Michelangelo, but on like 240p picture of it. So it's like very heavily pixelated, and like you're not going to get the full effect there. So um, so that's one thing. Is just make an event out of it and prepare yourself for it. And the other, I think, maybe the most important thing is to again go in it with the assumption of ignorance, that you may not get it and that's okay, but don't be too quick to say like, okay, this isn't my cup of tea.
Mm-hmm.
I have more faith in the ears of the public that given enough training and exposure, they can eventually appreciate really complicated music. Because that's how it used to be. You know, Mozart was pop at the time. So,
Right. It was pop at the time. It was, yeah. So much of what you're saying is so beautiful to me because it so much speaks to the religious sense in man. To say, to have an assumption of ignorance is to say that there's something that I can receive that I cannot derive on my own. That there's, and that's a posture of religiosity, this receptivity to receive what may or may not be given.
right, right, exactly. Yeah, it's an attitude of humility that I think you need to go into these things with.
Yeah.
Uh, and you know, maybe the other thing I would say is just pay like thought is kind of the enemy of really appreciating music. Um, you know, it's not like it's going to, like we're going to completely banish thoughts for the entire duration of the Bach Mass in B minor, but just, you know, trying to pay as close attention as we can to each individual element, and um, then just, yeah, try and try and try again. And maybe, you know, if Bach is just not doing it for you at first, try a different composer. Go to, you know, somebody who might be a little bit more extroverted
Mm-hmm.
and like wears his heart on his sleeve, like Chopin. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I'd say the same thing about like maybe don't start with Brahms. You know, he hides his true feeling a little bit more than Chopin was just like
Gotta have
belting out.
pulling you out. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So then I guess what you're saying right now makes me think that, of course, music is related to formation. Music forms us or deforms us, but it seems to me that there's a lot of humility, like you were saying, humility in knowing, okay, if I'm not formed quite yet, for this to be a helpful or beautiful encounter for me, start somewhere else and build up to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe the last thing I would say is, um, so one of the things when people find out that I write classical music, that I love classical music, they'll say like, "Oh, it's so relaxing,"
Oh, that's so
and
cool. That's so
yeah, or they'll say like, "Oh, it's very pretty," and I know what they mean, and they're like very well intentioned, and I know they feel that.
well,
I
that's better than what people tell philosophy or theology people. You know, it's what are you going to do with that? You know.
right, right. I get a fair amount of that as well. I would say if you listen to, yeah, maybe again, the Bach Mass in B minor or one of the ballades by Chopin, and
Okay.
you come away thinking like, that was pretty, you probably didn't get it. You know, that's not to say that you didn't actually find some of it pretty, but you're probably just getting like the perfume of the real content
Ah,
rather than the real content.
wow. What a relationship with music we must all cultivate. I mean,
Mm.
this is Bach has been on my friend list for so long, and I keep ghosting the guy
Mm,
to return. But
right.
you kind of reminded me of the with the relaxing thing. So I taught moral theology for a number of years for high school students, and morality is very much connected to music. And so on Fridays we would have our Project Beauty moments, and I would play a piece of concert music. And you get in trouble if you were trying to do your homework while you listen. You had to be an active listener,
Mm.
right? And that was very difficult for people who are Snapchatty, Twitter,
Yes.
like this 2-3 minutes of silence, or not of silence, of of concert music, of classical music, is just, torture. And I think that for many times they thought, or at least initially they thought, Miss Riz is trying to do this so that we can start behaving and, relax. And I guess Mozart's good for your brain. And no. The reason we're listening to this is because it is good to listen to this, and because it is beautiful to listen to for its own sake. That is why we are listening to this. And then related, because it is beautiful and worth listening to for its own sake, just like you are beautiful and worth existing for your own sake, that has an impact on you. And one of the most, I don't like categories of success and failure. That's too secular for me. But one of the most, I guess I'll say, fruitful and proud moments of my teaching career was a student who said that he could no longer listen to pop music the way that he could before. Yes, it was not helpful. I mean, he was one of the most opposing people in my class. Like, Miss Riz, can't we listen to country music? Country music's not immoral, as if I was, if it was about the 10 Commandments. And by the end of the year, he's like, I cannot listen to certain forms of rap music or certain form, it's offensive to me now. And that came from no lecturing or preaching. That came from listening to concert music. So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, no, that's actually absolutely right. I'm really happy you taught it the way you did, and that, hey, we're listening to this for its own sake. So that was absolutely not my experience going through school and being taught. We just had music class. I think we learned how to play something on the recorder, and then they told us just a list of composers and a little bit about them. So oh, Beethoven was deaf. That's incredible. And we learned all these facts about them, but we learned about them the same way we learned about Marco Polo. Just purely for their historical importance.
Right.
And that's it's to completely miss the point. Of course, it adds to the musical understanding. You find out that he's completely deaf when he wrote Symphony No. 9. That's absolutely incredible. But the real thing about that story is Symphony No. 9.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, to learn music for its own sake, and that it's good to listen to for its own sake, is, I think, really, really important. And it's just a completely foreign concept to most of us, including me, until I had that moment with Beethoven.
Amazing. So that being said, you have an exciting life change happening. Tell us about what you're doing next in your musical journey, Ben.
Oh, yeah. So I'm going, I was in school in Kansas City for a while. For 2 years, I was studying composition at a very, I guess they would call it progressive, which is kind of euphemistic, but it's a very avant-garde conservatory. And I got progressively more and more just kind of beaten down by the stuff that they would make us listen to. So I think my first experience of that was 5 people popping bubble wrap into a microphone, and then they send the signal through a computer and it makes some screeches, and and people were completely baffled that I was not loving this. But it was hurting my ears. It seemed just so fraudulent. And the head of the composition department there, one of his pieces is plucking a cactus into a microphone. And so I just kind of had enough of that and wanted to go somewhere that teaches it much more traditionally. I talked a little bit about counterpoint earlier, which is the thing that Bach was such a master of, just how one melody can overlay on top of another melody and both be great in and of themselves, but also harmonize perfectly without clashing at all or losing their independence.
Yeah.
So counterpoint used to just be well understood as you need to be a master of this if you're going to write anything worth writing. The school I was at, they teach you a half a semester of it in your final year of composition. So I'm going somewhere that will make me take 2 years of it strenuously, because I'm completely convinced that it's necessary for somebody to write something worth listening to.
So you have to go all the way to Europe. You've got to leave.
Oh yes, yes, that's the exciting bit, is I'm going to Spain. Yeah.
Well, I think the same problem exists in the fine arts, right?
Yeah.
That political ideology has become the idol, the god, that it has even affected how we learn our craft in music and the fine arts and so forth. And so you have to actually leave the United States of America to go to Europe.
So, yeah, so part of it is the political bit, but then also it's like the early modernists. So in the fine arts is Duchamp putting the urinal in I think it was 1919. And he was making a statement about how the word art is losing its meaning because there was just so much kitsch and sugary stuff that people were kind of falling for as real art.
Yeah.
And the same thing was true in music. So Schoenberg was in part reacting to some of the like overly saccharine, like Viennese waltzes. I'm not going to step on your toes with Johann Strauss because I know your affection for him.
Strauss, but forgiven.
Yeah. So, and, it's worth mentioning that he was not trying to compose mass. He was very self-consciously composing waltzes that are supposed to be fun and danceable and everything. But that was in part the type of music that the early modernists were reacting to. So it was like the 12-tone system in music, but then ever since then, it's kind of put in the mind of everybody that to do something worth doing in art, you have to do something that nobody has ever done before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically it, which is, they leave out the part where Schoenberg is like a complete musical genius and could write totally well in the style of like late Romantic. And so, yeah, ever since then, it's just, you need to do something that nobody's ever done before. And I was told this ad nauseum by all of my professors. And my response was always just like, well, there's an infinite amount of things that nobody ever did because it was stupid to do them.
Yes, it wasn't beautiful. So do you agree with, I know we both are big fans of Roger Scruton. Would you agree that music has also betrayed beauty? Because like self-expression, creativity, innovation, novelty has exchanged beauty, and because beauty takes craft and work.
Yes, yeah. Some people I think do that cynically, where they really don't have the ability to compose anything meaningful or beautiful, and instead just go for the easy thing, which is like, publicize yourself well, and then just do some insane thing into a microphone. But there are some people who are not self-conscious and who are real composers, but I think who are just fundamentally kind of, the whole topic of beauty is kind of like radioactive to them because they're unable to separate kitsch from real beauty. So again, that was what is this idea that for something to be truly beautiful in the 21st century, it has to be very, very difficult, which I think is wrong. I understand it. It's a reaction in part against this terrible music that happens, basically 100% of our public lives while we're out walking about, which takes absolutely no effort to listen to. And gets old after the third time you've heard it, even if you liked it the first time.
Right. It's astonishing. In my youth, I would buy songs because of course I was going to love them forever. And then you listen to them 2 years later and going, I can't believe that I got excited about this. This is
yeah. I think I made "Don't Worry, Be Happy" my alarm clock. It was like I was in a dystopian novel after a couple of weeks of that. But contrast that with Bach. I mean, I listen to the Well-Tempered Clavier almost every morning.
Okay, so you've given us a piece, but so we're gonna conclude this episode with a piece that you've chosen. Tell us about the piece that you've chosen.
Yeah, so it's Qui tollis peccatum. You pronounce the Latin. Qui tollis peccata mundi. Yes. I might be pronouncing it wrong. But Who takes away the sins of the world? It's from his Mass in B minor. And the Mass in B minor is just, it's indescribably amazing. But this is a short movement, which is why I chose it, and it's just so interesting. You can hear what a progressive composer Bach was. He's doing stuff harmonically that people did not do again for another 150 years. And also just I would pay attention to how the vocal lines in particular imitate one another. It'll be stated at first by, I think, the soprano, and then immediately once she sings peccata, the same thing is imitated by the tenor, if I'm right. But at a different, it's a fifth below. That might be too technical, but just listen as closely as you can to what's happening.
So for those who are listening from the podcast, the episode will conclude with that music. And for those who are watching the YouTube video, I will link that piece in the comment section so you can bring it up that way and actively listen to it on your own. Ben, this was a delight. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah.
Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners about music, Bach, your story, modernity? I'm moved that someone like Edith Stein, a Jewish woman, a German Jewish woman, and early 20th century, and then my friend Ben from the Midwest can have such similar experiences and encounters.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to say other than just that whoever you are that's listening or watching this, I'm really excited for you. There's 4% of the population is tone deaf. They might be unreachable, but for the rest of the 96 or 95% of us, just keep going. You will, I think, eventually get it and be happy you did.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thanks, Simone.